Hey, it's good to be here. I'm 2 years into nursing and I'm about to do travel nursing. So I'm home for a month, just kind of relaxing, doing this, doing some like fun things, and then back to work.
Nice. So no Survivor games in your near future?
Probably not. I'll be in North Carolina.
Gotcha. Well, if there's any up there, I'm sure they'd be lucky to have you. Nate, how are you doing today? What a big episode production-wise for you guys. What what was your general feeling kind of watching that live? Just overall, like episode for that week, what was that feeling watching it play out?
Yeah, I think ultimately the twist kind of worked out in one of the more interesting ways, which is what we were hoping for. And also like just seeing some of the players step up and kind of handle the twist in their own way, it made it more interesting too. So it played out really well, even if the ultimately it was kind of predictable who was going to go out this week.
Yeah, and it was a very kind of like cautious gameplay at the beginning. I felt like we entered this week off of a big blindside of John and kind of a fizzle out of Madeline, so to speak. And it seemed like everybody kind of knew what was going on when you had them say, drop your buffs. But then they had a big surprise when the at odds die came into play and they had to roll it. And the number that it landed on was the number of tribes that they would be splitting into. So 1 through 6, and they rolled a 1, which meant that it was a big, giant merged tribe. What was that like planning that out for production? How like what were the scenarios that you guys ran?
Yeah, I believe Grace had like a suitcase with a ton of buffs, like an enormous amount of buffs. And it was just kind of crazy because we were hoping for like one or six, like six tribes of like two or three people would be interesting. But at the same time, having what we had happen was really cool too. We could have also just had a boring like a two tribe swap per usual, but ultimately it was kind of very stressful and we didn't plan things too much like that afterwards, but it was fun to do it once to see how it would turn out.
Yeah, that's definitely a once in a game type of thing, and I think it played out pretty well for at least camera time. Nicole, as a player, a former player, how do you think you would have felt if all of a sudden you think you're gonna swap, and then next thing you know, you're basically merged, but not really?
Yeah, pretty much how Sophie was explaining about, she was like, I had so many plans for this week. Like, I had backups for backups, like figuring out every way this could have gone, except for going straight to a merge. So I feel like I would have tried to plan things out, but then once it happened, I would just be like, oh my gosh, how do I even go on from here in the moment? But it was definitely crazy to watch. I wasn't expecting it.
I feel like we are seeing kind of not just the evolution of, the players play the game, even though they haven't even seen this a season one when they're playing this game. But we're also seeing like the production's twist kind of stepping it up, and not in like a over the top way as Mr. Jeffrey Probst has been doing on the most recent seasons. But these are actually kind of like unique twists that have different outcomes that we typically don't see. Nate, I guess what was it like kind of coming up and utilizing this die from day one and kind of progressing it through the season? Are we going to see it kind of without spoiling anything? Are we going to see it like kind of come into play in these pivotal, like, I guess, milestones in the game that players typically go for?
So basically, what we've seen so far are the main points that we're going to see that die being used. I will say that we're a few episodes away from COVID hitting, and that's going to definitely change the way the game is played. Um, but yeah, it was really cool to be able to utilize it in the way we did and not overuse it. Use it in the right amount of ways, and use it in ways that we are confident in.
Yeah, I mean, I think so far so good. I can't wait to maybe see a potential virtual dice roll and how that virtual uh, gameplay may come. But right now, we are focusing on this episode. Everybody came together into one group. However, they had to perform this challenge separately. We saw many different strategies kind of play out in this kind of unique take on a Survivor Classic. And we have our 7 winners and our 7 losers. The 7 losers are going straight to tribal council. Turns out 4 of these losers through the challenge. Nicole, is it ever a good idea to throw the challenge?
Not how they do it. I mean, if somehow you can pull it off to where no one knows, but the fact that it was all four of them, and then they were very obvious about it because they were like making jokes about it, and then people would ask them, and they were like, "Oh, CK was, I don't know. Like throwing is a strong word, something like that." And I think that it's just gonna create enemies out of their tribe. They're going to see that they're super close, they want to protect each other, and they're just annoyed. The people that were working with Haley are going to be annoyed that she got out because they threw a challenge. So I think I understand how they thought that it made sense, and maybe for this week it made sense because it kept them safe. But I think there's going to be a lot of consequences that come with all of this challenge throwing.
I think that's a big move to play. I agree with you. I feel like it might have soured at least their tribe's presence between the other tribes in the game. Nate, when they kind of came out and said that they threw it, was it pretty obvious for you, or like did you like I don't know what was the vibe like during those challenges for each of their runs?
Well, I think Hallie mentioned in her confessional, it was like 3 hours long, and the thing is we maxed them out at 20 minutes, like, that was,
Uh,
like, your DQ'd at that point, and we basically went the full 20 minutes for every group because of Kalahari throwing it. Like, Idris literally laid down at one point and was just kind of, like, chilling there, so it was very obvious for everyone that saw them that they were throwing, but I guess they did think it was something that was gonna protect them because they already felt like they were on the outs because of the other 2 tribes meeting up without them. So it's kind of like, "Hey, we're just gonna stick together for now," because if they hadn't thrown it, I feel like we're pretty much guaranteed one of them's gonna lose and potentially get voted out. So I think it might have been a good decision for them, but we'll see. Like Nicole said, if they're seen as being super close now, that might be bad for them in the future.
mhm. And one question that I had as a viewer, did Jai throw it? I don't know if I missed it in the episode, but I know he timed out, didn't he?
Jai did time out. He did not throw it. It was only Kalahari that threw it. So the other three, Delaney, Haley, and Jai, all lost because they just were at the bottom for the challenge.
Yeah, he seemed very shocked when CK told him that he threw it, and he seemed kind of like I wouldn't say bummed, but just the fact that like he's on the same level as somebody who threw a challenge is where he's at. But it was a really unique situation that happened and that played out because the only really conversations that we had from the people that were in the safe seven, I guess, were really like Ethan meeting up with Delaney and CK, and they were kind of like on the drawing board, figuring everything out. And that was kind of a standout episode or moment for this episode was just, you know, I don't know. Every time you guys take to that whiteboard and plot everything out, I feel like someone's game is about to be exposed. And it looks like CK's might have been exposed at this point. Um, Nicole, any comments on, that whole trio dynamic this far in the game?
Yeah, it definitely changed in this episode because it starts out with Delaney saying, I 100% trust CK. And then they're having the conversation and they're trying to put up one of CK's people. And then they're like, why do we only get to keep two of our people, but you get to keep all four? And you can see them kind of like turning on him. And then when CK makes that comment about, they were like, with this vote, if it goes our way, we'll get dinner. And then he's like, oh, I promised that to someone else. And then Delaney's like, who? I thought it was the three of us. And then it switches to the end with Ethan saying that they need to get CK out. So that definitely was a game-changing conversation. And CK went from having all the information to having too much. And I think we're starting to see his game crumble.
Yeah, I feel the same way, and I don't know about you guys, but he probably won't be appearing on my top 3 players of this week because I feel like he really kind of butchered every single execution that he might have set up. Nate, what was the general vibe from, CK's playing this week for you on production?
Yeah, so I mean, Nicole and I were part of a powerhouse trio season one, Chacho Macho Bros. Um, but the thing is, we had a level of trust that we're definitely not seeing with Delaney, Ethan, and CK. CK is basically he's kind of laughing it off and throwing it out there how many connections he has. He has all of Kalahari, he has Jay High, he has their trio, he has Chadwick, which no one knows about. So basically, he's connected to almost everyone in the game. And Delaney and Ethan are now catching on to that because he's not protecting that information very well. He's kind of leaking it.
Mhm.
So up to this point, he's done really well keeping all of his alliances secret, but now he's just kind of haphazardly sharing that information. So that might not reflect well on him in the future.
Yeah, that's an interesting point. I kind of just get this vision of him, kind of like telling on himself and seeing how much he can like get away with without anybody really noticing. And it's just kind of like, how much information can I spill? And what are you going to do about it? Like, let me see how much I can get away with before you actually come after me. And I don't know if that's a good strategy to do, but it's a really interesting strategy because I feel like it's bold and you can maybe get away with it if you play everything right. However, I don't know. I don't know if he's doing it right. But you said that something about he's got something with Chadwick, and that's something really interesting because we have not seen Chadwick or kind of really his reactions to um, the vote out. What was his unseen attitude to John's blind side?
He was definitely caught off guard, but Chadwick is a very low key player. So he doesn't really do anything about it right away. He definitely lets that kind of process in his brain for a while. So there wasn't really much action from him following tribal right away. And plus, he was safe. So he didn't really
Yeah.
need anything right away.
Were there any like unaired conversations or conversations that this episode uh aired but like, kind of grazed over because of the unsafe seven, I will call them, very uniquely titled? Were there any like conversations that we did not get to see that might have been very pivotal for either the outcome of this episode or kind of describe any relationships that we might see moving forward?
Yeah, so there's definitely a lot of meetups that happen, a lot of cross travel things that we're not seeing, but also a lot of those don't have any impact on the game. So I know Sophie and Andrew met up quite a bit throughout the game, and you don't see much of that right now. Um, yeah, there's some meetups, but most of the safe people didn't really do a ton this week. They kind of just they didn't even intermix at all. They were just like, even though it was like a fake merge kind of situation, they were all pretty satisfied with being safe, and that was enough. I know Haley, all four of the girls that were in the bottom seven, they all met up together as a group, talked about kind of doing a girl thing, but obviously Hallie and Lily weren't really in their camp at all. They were very much Kalahari. So there wasn't really much to do with that either.
Gotcha. Nicole, when you are in like a bottom seven situation, what would your play be at this point? Do you kind of like play the field and talk to a lot of people, or do you just stick with your tribal lines?
I mean, I think that people, besides Kalahari, I feel like people aren't sticking in their tribes as much. So I feel like the seven people should work together and maybe vote some of Kalahari off. So I would probably do that just because they're strong players. They're kind of an easy pick just because people might be upset with them throwing the challenge.
Yeah, I think it's a very unique situation because Kalahari was the tribe that keeps losing, and very often we may see Survivor play out where the tribe that keeps getting beaten down at the beginning is typically the strongest group of people moving forward in the game. And I think we may be seeing some repercussions of that. Uh, Nate, question for you from a production standpoint. Again, uh, we see Haley kind of get some support from Delaney during the discussion with CK and Ethan, but she seemed relatively gung ho about getting her out previously on the other tribe. What do you think that shift was, and why do you think she just stuck with it to go, like to get
Yeah,
her
well,
out?
from Delaney's perspective, she doesn't really know for sure how close CK is with Kalahari, with J High. So it's like Haley doesn't realize that basically everyone in the bottom seven, except for her, is connected to CK. And CK is in the power position. So Haley has very little chance of surviving this week. But Delaney also, she threw out Idris's name. She's like, okay, CK for sure will be okay with getting rid of Idris. And CK shot that down immediately. So it's like, I think Delaney, in a sense, wanted to protect Haley just because they had been on the same tribe and there was kind of that vibe. But yeah, in previous weeks, she was completely fine with getting rid of Haley. So it was interesting to see her step up and kind of try to do something on her behalf.
Yeah, I thought it was interesting to see that play out because it seemed just like, I don't know, at that point in the game, I felt like if I were in that position, I want to take a step back and kind of look at that whiteboard and see where everybody's at and not really try to campaign for somebody that I don't know if they would campaign for me. Haley might have, but if CK wants to take the driver's seat on this one, I'll let him. And I feel like he still got to, but Delaney and Ethan are both aware of it. And Chadwick is in our comments right now. Chadwick is clarifying that the guys told him what had happened immediately after Tribal. So he was just feeling glad that John didn't play his idol. I feel like John is not glad that he didn't play his idol, but Chadwick, I'm glad that you're glad that John didn't play his idol. And I'm glad that we get to see you for another week. I know you didn't get a lot of airtime this week, but excited to see some more Chadwick going on here. So again, there's not a ton to dissect from this episode other than just the fact that our trio that seemed to be in the power position is falling apart. Not really by not too much yet. They're still kind of letting CK like play and do what he needs to do, but I feel like both Ethan and Delaney have enough ammunition and enough people with them to be able to combat this Kalahari 4, I guess, so to speak. So Nicole, moving forward, if you were in, let's say Nicole, or not Nicole, you're Nicole. Nicole, what would you do in Delaney and Ethan's position? And then what would you do in CK's position?
For Delaney and Ethan, I think it's hard because they're acknowledging that they don't want to work with CK in the future, but if they go around to all of CK's troops telling them, let's get CK out, if they're not ready for that, then they could easily all turn on them. So I think they need to wait and let the information kind of spread around, kind of like when Idris and Jai were talking. And Idris was like, yeah, CK was being kind of sketchy, just showing that CK's talking to a lot of people and people realize that they're not the only ones close with CK. So I think maybe they should wait a week or two and kind of gauge out how other people are feeling about CK. In CK's spot, I feel like he just needs to identify who he's closest with and stop trying to get all this information, because like you were saying, I think he thinks it's fun and he's like trying to throw out extra information and seeing what people do, but he needs to bring it down, figure out who his allies are, whether he wants to stick with his tribe, and maybe stop all of his extra conversations and just try to lay low for a little bit.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think you hit the nail on the head with that one. We do know, and we keep referencing throughout this podcast that CK has referred to himself as Russell Hands. If he wants to play like Russell Hands, he will play like Russell Hands. And I feel like it's really fun to see because he's not as unlikable as some of the things that Russell does. However, he does have like this information flow and ability to just kind of like throw something to the wall. If it sticks, then he's going to run with it. If it doesn't, it doesn't matter. He's going to pick it up and keep throwing it until it does stick. It's like this aggressive mentality that I don't think a lot of these players are prepared for. However, I think, we kind of have like that, like Ethan and Delaney, I kind of get a vibe of like Sandra and like Courtney kind of in Heroes versus Villains, where they like start to process and go like, this guy is a player, and I don't know if I really want to play with him to go forward. So it's really fun to see this crazy atmosphere come together, at least from my viewer perspective. So Nate, moving into the tribal council, what was the vote count?
I believe it was basically unanimous. Haley went out. Like Jay High and Delaney both voted for Haley as well.
So, Nicole, if you were on the other tribe and see kind of basically a unanimous vote, um, I guess where do you go from there? Like that's kind of that tells a lot, but at the same time, it really doesn't tell too much. Like you know what I mean? It's more like they all clearly work together, but they all come from separate tribes. So how did that come to fruition? How, if you were in the safe seven, how would you play that for the next move?
That's hard because I feel like you said, not everyone was working together. It just kind of got spread around who the vote was going to be from like CK's group. So I think that it's pretty open for people to kind of change things, and because you know that group of seven isn't necessarily working together. So I think it just depends. Maybe they'll go for CK, a bigger target, or maybe they'll pick off like Lily since she's been getting votes every time. So I'm not sure.
Yeah. I think it really does depend on where the game goes from here. I don't, as a viewer, no spoilers from production, Nate, but as a viewer, I don't foresee them going another challenge completely as one tribe. I think they might try to roll that dice again and move from there. So we might see another formation of a swap. But running a challenge again with 13 people, I guess, now still in the game, that's gonna be rough. So either we're gonna see another swap moving forward, and I think that'll definitely spice it up a little bit and get some more people that haven't worked together yet intertwined. Or I could be completely wrong, and we have another 7 safe, 6 not. Nicole, what are your bold predictions? Having played a Survivor LU season before, you kind of are familiar with production and their ideas. What are your bold predictions, at least for the format of the game moving forward?
Oh, I don't I don't know. Bold predictions. Um Not really the format, but I want to see Melanie initiate something crazy. So she was my roommate my sophomore year, her senior
Mm.
year. And so I'm like rooting for her. And I feel like she's been wanting to play, but in the beginning she was at the bottom of her tribe. And last week she didn't go to tribal. But I hope in my bold prediction is that Melanie like leads a vote for one of the big players out.
Melanie has definitely grown on me this week. I feel like we didn't really get a lot of content from her, but seeing that her supposed number one Haley is now out of the game, I feel like that opens her up to have a lot more playing room where it comes to this. And who knows, maybe she could be somebody that Delaney and Ethan can pick up as somebody to combat this, Kalahari CK mind hive that's been kind of forming so far. But she was definitely a player that kind of emerged this week. We didn't really talk a lot about her this week or in this podcast tonight. But yeah, some of her confessionals, now that you mention it, do stand out for me in that sense. I think for me moving forward, I think, oh man, I do foresee a big move coming against CK. Whether it's going to be a blindside on one of his alliance members, I could see Idris going from a casualty of that. I could see. I don't know if Hallie's going to go to a casualty of that. I honestly think that she has like she would turn against him if offered. I think that's my gut feeling with that. Um, so maybe somebody just on Kalahari, I feel like. I don't know if they're going to go for the head of the snake just yet, but they may go for one of his allies. Maybe J-High. J-High would be a juicy blindside. So that's just from outside of perspective, outside of Survivor LU. Those are my predictions for moving into next week. We kind of have just a short episode for this podcast recap this time. Drew is currently out in Real Foot right now, and we miss him this week, but he would love us to continue on his new tradition of assigning points for these players. And I think I'm going to do it a little differently this week because I don't know. I think starting with the top tier is a little anticlimactic. I think we should start in our third place So we're going to do, everybody's going to assign 3 people. They're 3 points, 2 points, or 1 point. I'll keep the total for it, and we'll move accordingly. So Nicole, who deserves your 3rd place ranking for this episode?
My 3rd place, I'd say Austin. He wasn't shown much in this episode, but I like that he's walked into yet another conversation. I think that's funny, and I think that people are going to trust him more because of that. And he's like not intentionally inserting himself into groups and maybe conversations that he wasn't invited to. So I'd say him.
Nate, who you got?
Yeah, I would agree with Austin actually, because like he's continuing to manage like Andrew well. With Andrew's paranoia, he keeps going to Austin, and for some reason, Austin's still being able to handle that. So yeah, I'd give 1 point to Austin.
I am also giving my 1 point to Austin. I was a big fan of him walking into that conversation again, and I feel like that is just kind of his theme so far is he keeps walking into these situations, but he's able to play it off in such a way that still kind of comes off as a non-threat. He's getting all this information, just at least seeing who is talking to who and how these conversations are going. So regardless of if he's meaning to be there or not, he's at least being included in something. So I'm giving my point to Austin. Nicole, who are you giving your 2 points to this week?
My 2 points, I'd have to say Ethan. I liked the whiteboard. I like that he's logical and has like a plan for all the people that he wants out. And I like him and Delaney together. I like how they work. So I think that he would get 2.
Nice. Nate, what about you?
I'm gonna give 2 to Hallie. I think that she's pretty much in a good spot. She's very aware of what CK is doing, but she's not doing anything right now because she knows it's not the right time, and she's just kind of chilling. And I always love a Hallie confessional too. She's pretty funny, so why not?
I am torn between both Ethan and Hallie. I think this week I'm going to go for Hallie for the player for 2nd place. I feel like she benefited the most from throwing that competition because I don't know if she would have been in the bottom 4. I feel like she could have been a target. So having her entire tribe there, that was probably a really smart move for her, whether intentional or not. I feel like it's playing out in her favor. I do want to give a shout out to Ethan, though. Having that whiteboard and calculating everything is pretty good. And I don't know. I think I'm going to give him a week off because I feel like he's coming in guns blazing next week for something. That's just my gut feeling for him, and he'll be getting more of my points later. So number 3, we are giving 3 points out. Nicole, who is your top player of this week?
My 3 points are going to go to Delaney. I like her the best. I think I like that she's starting to see through CK. And I just feel like people want to work with her, and I feel like she's in a good spot in this game.
Nate?
Yeah, I would agree, Delaney. Because if you're putting Ethan and Delaney side by side, I feel like this week especially highlighted more how perceptive she is. Even though Ethan caught on to it too, I feel like she's in a position to be a little bit more actionable than Ethan is. I feel like she based on her confessional, she wants to do something. Whether or not she's actually going to do something will be seen. But yeah, Delaney for sure.
I am on the Delaney train for this week. I had a feeling that we might have a similar lineup because of the just amount of people that we've seen play and kind of get their story developed this week. But Delaney has my full 3 points. I think that Delaney has a really good head on her shoulders, and she's not necessarily just letting CK walk all over her. She is kind of being combative at some of the things that he's saying, which in turn kind of helps him dig his hole a little bit deeper, and she gets more information out of him just based on his reactions. So I think just the way that she's playing this whole CK thing and still getting information, even though he's kind of willingly giving it to her, it's the fact that he's still willingly giving it to her that's most impressive to me. So we are hitting 30 minutes on this podcast. Kind of a short one for our Survivor LU, what we usually run, but I wanted to give a great thank you to Nicole for joining us this week. It was so great to have you. I hope you're able to join us for the future. And Nate, what can we expect in this upcoming week's episode?
Yeah, I think, well, we've seen a lot of people playing hard up to this point, and I think that might come to a head for someone in this game. We'll see.
Ominous, ominous. I hope that person is not Chadwick. Chadwick, thanks for tuning in, buddy. That's all from us today. Please join us next week. Sometime next week, we will be going live again to go over episode 5 of Survivor LU season 2 at odds. Thanks for joining us. I hope everybody has a fantastic Tuesday and enjoy the rest of your week. Have a good night.